but it always went out of control. Why do people from good families become addicted? I think we hear this in the rehab every single day. What did we do wrong? You know, I'm the mom. What did I do wrong? I'm the wife. What did I do wrong? I'm the dad, the uncle. You know, where did we go wrong? Oh, it must have been the mother's fault. It must have been the granny's fault. It must have been the dealer's fault. There is nobody to blame. Addiction is a democratic illness. Anybody who takes drugs and alcohol runs the risk of becoming addicted. I think particularly today with the drugs that we have available on the streets and in pharmacies, it's actually quite easy to become addicted. You either become physically addicted or you become emotionally addicted. Lots of drugs, you become emotionally addicted very quickly. Crack is probably one of the most addictive drugs, but physically they're not addicted. They are completely mentally and emotionally addicted. So why can't they just stop? Because they're addicted. Most addicts want to stop, even when they're fighting us and they don't want to go into treatment and they're resisting and we're getting court orders. Somewhere inside, they do want to stop. They just don't know how, and they're terrified of feeling the feelings that the drugs and alcohol numbed and took away. So frankly, they can't stop because they're addicted. Why do they abuse the family? I have a very blasé outlook on this, and I'm going to say it first and then explain why I say it. They abuse the family because they can, because we put up with it. Part of this disease is it's a me. It's all about me. Me, 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 me. I want what I want when I want it, and I'll do anything to get it. So the abuse in the family becomes a cycle, and it starts off with enabling. And we enable for the peace, and because we enable because we don't actually know what's going on. So our child would come to us and say, Mom, I failed grade 11 and I don't like the school. Can I please move to another school? And we move them. Then they move to the new school and they don't really like the headmaster because he's a bit of an idiot. Can they please move to another school? And we'll say yes. And then they'll come and say, oh, Mom, I need money for a haircut. They go out, they don't get the haircut. They come back, they say, oh, no, I really needed airtime. I'm a little bit short. Can I have some more money just for the haircut? Which never materialized. And because it happens so slowly, we don't want to believe our children, our loved ones are liars or manipulative. So we start believing them. And that enabling syndrome, left long enough, turns into codependency. Codependency, we did a whole workshop a couple of weeks ago, which we will repeat probably in a month or so. Codependency is being addicted to the addict, addicted to the crises, trying to solve, trying to sort, trying to understand. But control is the codependence drug. How does it deteriorate so quickly? I don't believe it does. I think we live with it for a long time. Most of us live with it for more than a year. Some of us live with it for 15 years. I sometimes get late night calls from families who say, I've got a problem with my child and I need a rehab tonight. And I said to them, I'm sorry, I can't, especially now with COVID, I can't just bring them in immediately. Please wait for the morning and we'll arrange it. And they get very abusive with me. And I said to them, but he was an addict yesterday at 3 o'clock. Why didn't you phone me? And 6 months ago, why didn't you phone me? And 5 years ago, why didn't you phone me? And I think the reality is families and parents only reach out when there's absolute crises, when it's so out of control. And that's where we feel, oh my goodness, this has just happened far too quickly. Addiction actually takes a very, very long time to manifest. Not 6 months, not a year. Sometimes it can be 2 to 3 to 6 to 10, 15 years. How do we drop the crisis? How do we stop the crises? We don't. and I come from a tough love background. So what we believe is, instead of trying to stop crises and prevent them from happening, we take the crisis and work with it, so that we can actually bring the bottom up instead of waiting for the addict to reach rock bottom. That's a very old myth about addicts have to want to get help, and they need to reach a rock bottom. I believe families reach a rock bottom far quicker than any addict does. So they need the crises, and it's up to the family to bring the crises up. Even if your loved one relapses after treatment, it's so easy to say, oh my God, rehab didn't work, NA didn't work, the sponsor didn't work, the counselor didn't work, I'm in crisis, what do I have to wait another 5 years? Please call us, because we coach you on how to bring the bottom up quickly. And that's by taking very firm stands and boundaries, and not allowing the addiction to progress by not being an enabler. So when a crisis happens, please reach out, phone somebody, ask for help, because that's when we need it the most. Okay, why do they need treatment? I think most of us really hoped in the beginning that our loved ones could stop using on their own, because they loved us, because they could see how much they were hurting us. The crises were getting larger, wider, deeper. People who are addicted need treatment because of that brain change I spoke about earlier, and their thoughts are completely distorted, their perceptions are distorted, and their behavior becomes completely unacceptable. So most people go into treatment. What happens in rehab? What's our responsibility? Why do you bring your loved ones? And firstly, I think most of the time what we say is, we start off with the detox, and that's helping somebody come off the drugs in a dignified way. I remember saying to a rehab center many years ago, but that's not right. They've made us suffer so much. Can't they just suffer a little bit? Maybe they should just be locked in a room and go cold turkey. And it was explained to me, which I didn't understand at the time, but addicts need to be treated with dignity. And how you treat them from the beginning can actually mold their treatment program and recovery going forward. So when I speak about this, I'm speaking about it from a Changes perspective and what we do in Changes Rehab. We detox in a dignified way. We have a general practitioner, a psychiatrist, 24-hour nursing, and the team is quite smart and jacked up around the detox process. So we help them emotionally, while the doctors and nurses help them physically. Most drugs require detox. They need to come off it slowly. We are very scared and try and prevent the rapid withdrawal method, which means that it could bring on seizures. And that could be from any drug. It could be from alcohol, benzodiazepines, cocaine, crystal meth, cat, but mainly benzodiazepines and alcohol. When they come into treatment and they're busy with detox, why is there a blackout period? Blackout period is where we don't let them contact you. And we've got specific reasons for that. The family's in so much turmoil and so much chaos when they come into rehab that we want answers, we want to fight, we want to attack, we want to protect, we want to control. And families do not speak nicely to their loved ones. So whatever the crisis was that brought them into treatment, and however you work them into treatment, we keep them away from you to protect you from their abuse, but also to protect them from our abuse that we bestow upon them. And it could be silly things like, just tell me why you did it. That could trigger something for an addict who's not ready he has his treatment process is only a day or two old. So we don't want triggers for them. We don't want them to be in pain, but we also don't want you to be in any more pain. why do they attend group therapy? It's been evaluated and assessed for many years, probably close to about 30 years now. And group therapy is one of the strongest tools that we have in our treatment protocols in dismantling the different defense mechanisms, but mainly breaking denial. So group therapy is run by at least one or two therapists. We have a very strict regime. They can't drink, they can't eat, they can't smoke, they cannot leave their chair no matter what happens. They're not allowed to get violent with each other. They're not allowed to get verbally abusive with each other. So group therapy is a safe space to start talking. Sometimes we need to guide the process. Sometimes they just open up and start sharing. But when somebody shares deeply, it allows the rest of the group to identify, and it resonates with them and allows them to talk about their pain. It's such an incredible tool to dismantle the layers of denial, and also for them to see the role they've played in their family, because group therapy becomes a microcosm. So somebody in that group will be the girlfriend, the boyfriend, the mother, the father, the husband, the wife, the granny, the sister, the uncle, aunt, and that allows them to get better, heal, but also see how their behaviors affect somebody else. So if somebody arrives late in group, we don't let them in because they don't have to drive there. They know they've got a 15-minute break. In that time, they've got to go to the loo, have a smoke, and grab their file and go to group. Why we don't let them leave is because if they're having an emotional experience and they get up and walk out, it dissolves that emotional experiences, it disperses it, it robs the rest of the group of that emotional shift, and it's the same behavior that they did at home with you. So if they do walk out or don't come to group, we have different strategies in which to deal with it. Not so long ago, we had somebody who would not come to group every day. He had a headache. And after about 2 or 3 weeks, we decided, you know what, he won't come to group, we'll take group to him. So we went into his bedroom and we ran group therapy. And when he left rehab, he was very quick to post a negative review. What kind of rehab takes people into the room, the counselors in the group into the room? Well, the rehab that's sick and tired of him behaving the same way he did with his parents and ducking and diving and eluding and colluding. So we met it that way, and it's actually a very powerful mechanism to use. Group therapy is also there to call them out on their dishonesty, their lies, because sometimes they don't know that they're lying. It calls them out on how other people see them, and it also helps them deal with the trauma that they've had in their lives, and teaches them new skills, how to cope with feelings, and the very feelings that they avoided while they were using, they can now cope with through group therapy. We also use the 12 steps, and one of those, and I think Brian did a great lecture a couple of weeks ago on the 12 steps, which we will repeat again in the future. But basically, 12 steps is a worldwide program that was written by Dr. Bill and Bob in 1935. And the value of one addict helping another is without parallel. So they've written lots of books, there's literatures, there's step work guides, there's Just for Today, daily readings. There are now, particularly with the internet, thousands of options of learning how to do the 12 steps. I highly recommend it, especially for families. At the end of the slideshow, there's places that you can go for help. Why do most rehabs use the abstinent model? Kate, are there any questions yet? I can't see.
No questions yet. No hands up. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, there is one question. Okay, does this mean that?
So why do
Sorry, Cheryl, can you hear me? Just a question.
Yes, I can.
Does this mean that the majority of blurry-eyed people we see, many of them on the streets, are drug addicts, drug abusers, not addicts? Does the other approach, chaining, locking in the room, or going cold turkey, actually work for some and maybe not others?
Okay, so I think here I'm going to give my personal experience. The first one is if people are blurry-eyed walking on the streets, if they're homeless or hustling or begging, there's a very good chance they're addicts. If they're just in the shops and shopping and, you know, going to have dinners, possibly. Generally, there's 3 stages of addiction, and the first stage is experimentation. Second stage is abuse. Third stage is addiction. The first stage of experimentation, kids and young people do like to become a bit brave and brag, so they may go out in public. But through abuse and addiction, they tend to become quite isolated and withdrawn, and it's hard to actually see them. They don't go out very much, and so it's hard to tell if those people are addicts or abusers. I like to say to people, you know, addiction may just not have happened yet, because if somebody's life is turning upside down and their behavior is changing and they're starting to tally up some consequences, there's a very, very good chance that they are addicts. I personally do not believe in the chaining up, locked, closed doors, cold turkey. We see it done with a lot of our other rehab centers. I've seen it personally. I've seen somebody who was locked up for 6 weeks by their family and just bed, and they did not give him medication. They literally made him go cold turkey, and he felt better 6 weeks later. Thank you very much, this has really helped, and walked out, used, and he died. So I understand that desperate times call for desperate measures. I know that it's so difficult to sometimes get them into treatment, but I don't believe in punishing an addict. Addicts, we can't punish somebody for being sick. So most of the times when we're getting to that point of desperation of having them locked up, it's rather advisable to contact a good social worker, do a court order, and get them committed against their will, because then the treatment center is bound to hold them or phone the police. And please believe me, it's not as simple as that. But when they see their family change, something does happen for them. Most of the time, when we're at that crisis point of absolute lunacy and insanity, we don't often see where we're going wrong. And where we go wrong, and I'll give us the tips in a little bit, but where we go wrong is that we are so sick of being sick that we don't make sense either. So we blow hot and cold, we up and down, we manipulate, we beg, we cajole, we bribe, and sometimes rather use the courts or the police to help intervene. There's interventionists now. There's ways that we can stop the disease from progressing, but it 98% of the time involves the family. The family just doesn't realize how much power we have, but we don't use it in a very healthy way. Is there any other questions, Kate?
Yeah, so coming from a family of addiction and being in recovery myself with younger kids, how do you suggest to educate kids and family on drugs and addiction?
Great question. Could I answer that at the end? Could we please hold that one until the end? Because I may answer some of the questions during the course of the slideshow. Why do most rehabs use the abstinent model? Many years ago, they used to separate alcohol and drugs. So they put alcoholics in Elam Clinic and drug addicts in Phoenix House. And they believed that addicts wouldn't understand alcoholics and alcoholics wouldn't understand addicts. But what we found over the last sort of 20, 25, 30 years is addicts would come out of treatment and cross-addict to alcohol. Alcoholics would come out of treatment and cross-addict to either marijuana or pills. And because there was a sense of righteousness, very self-righteous, I'm an alcoholic, I'm not as bad as a drug addict. The drug addict would be, I'm a drug addict, I don't drink alcohol, I've never had a problem with alcohol, so why must I stop drinking? So fortunately, the 12-step model included abstinence. And as we've progressed in this country and on this, in the world, we realize that abstinent model is important. And basically what that means is when somebody is in recovery, they need to abstain from all mood and mind altering substances in order to stay clean. Almost every single relapse that we see comes from drinking alcohol. A sip, one little glass causes massive, massive, massive relapses. And if they start cross-addicting, particularly to tablets or pharmaceuticals, then the brain just says, this drug is not the one I want, please give me the one I want. And that was the last drug I used, and use the same amount as you did when you stopped using. So the abstinent model is, for us, the only model that we subscribe to. We do not believe in harm reduction. We do not believe in an addict being able to drink moderately. Because if somebody is an addict or alcoholic, they have no limits. So they may start for a month or 2 or 3, even just sipping on a glass of wine, drinking a beer shandy, a non-alcoholic beer, and before we know it, they're full-blown relapse. Why does the duration of treatment affect the outcome? The longer a person stays in rehab, the better chance they've got of cleaning up. Many people come in with many issues, and we often say, just because medical aid pays for the 3 weeks, it doesn't mean that's how long it takes to treat an addict. It actually takes a full year to treat addiction properly. So the longer they stay in some form of treatment, the better chance they have of staying clean. How long should they stay in treatment? Each therapist will tell the client and the family, look, I think you need to do 2 months, I think you need to do 3 months, I think you need to go to halfway house, I think you need to go do outpatient. So each one should have that conversation with you. But from my experience, and I came from an era where my loved one didn't have the opportunity to go into a halfway house. So he would come home and he would relapse very quickly. And we wouldn't understand why. And it was because he came home into an environment that we hadn't recovered yet. We didn't understand the disease. I remember the first night my brother came out of treatment for the very first time. My mother served alcohol at the dinner table. We'd never had it before. It wasn't something we did, but she wanted to celebrate. And he had a glass of wine, and then he just said, I'm going to the toilet. He disappeared, went to Hillbrow. We didn't see him again for 6 months. So fortunately, halfway houses now exist. If you can afford it, please look into it, because it's very difficult for you to have them coming home, and it's very difficult for them to come home. We don't trust them yet. We will look for fault. We will police every movement that they make. That's not healthy. It's not treatment. It's not recovery. In our halfway houses, and a lot of you get very angry with us because you say, why are they allowed out? Why are they allowed their phones? Why do they make their own beds and do their own laundry? We get away with doing that because we empower them without judgment, without criticism. But we have clear boundaries, we have rules, and the longer they stay in that kind of environment, the easier it'll become when they get home to carry that through for long-term recovery. The different phases is primary care, secondary care, and tertiary care. Primary is in the rehab where the medication happens, the doctors, group therapies, individual therapy, the psychology, the psychiatry. Secondary care is a little bit less intensive. They learn to start sitting with themselves. They really work through the 12 steps properly, and they learn new ways of coping. And then tertiary is the halfway house, and it should include outpatient and individual therapy so that they can continue to work on their recovery. What is relapse? Why does it happen? Relapse, in a nutshell, means that there's something wrong in their program. Not necessarily something wrong with them, but something wrong in their program. It often means that they're not being honest about certain things. They are either pink clouding, where they're very happy and they're excited and they think that the world's a beautiful place, and they haven't yet come down and started facing life on life's terms. And sometimes relapse happens because they haven't had enough of using. It doesn't have to be a long, lengthy, dangerous relapse. The minute somebody picks up and you've seen that they picked up, please call the rehab center, speak to the counselor, ask them, what can we do? What can you do? How can we stop it? I personally don't believe that relapses should take too long, because the longer it is, the more they let go of what they learned in treatment, but they also use with a higher velocity. So if relapse happens, please call the rehab, get support, go to your support group, tell them what's happening. What role does the family play in recovery? Right, these are the 5 tips that I give families when I meet them and when they start treatment. Number 1, always present a united front. Always. The minute an addict or alcoholic knows that there's dissension in the family and that they can split, that's when the addiction escalates and it gets out of control. So the families need to work really, really hard. Even though you don't want to speak to each other, you hate him, she hates you, you're blaming each other, husband blames wife, wife blames husband. Work really hard on presenting that united front. Number 2, for me, the most powerful lesson I ever learned in recovery is less is more. So speak less, do less, shout less, give less money. Don't do the policing thing. Do very little for the addict. Why? Because that then allows them to take more responsibility for themselves and not rely on us in order to get better. I don't think I spelled this correctly, but never ever make an idle threat or promise. We are very quick to make promises. My dad used to say, I'll knock his block off. And he'd say that on a daily basis. But never ever could he knock his block off. So out of his frustration and desperation, he would say that. So try and abstain from making idle threats. Don't say something you're not going to follow through with. We ask you in the preamble, please, all verbal abuse must stop, beginning now. And that's part of it. We threaten, if you use again, I'm going to kick you out. Then they use again, we kick them out for an hour. Then you say, okay, you can come back, you can sleep in the dog's kennel, but you've got to stop using. And they go, okay, cool, thank you, I'll come back and I'll sleep in the dog's kennel. And then the next morning he's using. And you're saying, geez, what's wrong with you? Why are you still using? And that's because we move the goalposts. So when you're about to say something, make sure that you can stick to it and you're not going to renege on it, because if we do, they A, lose respect for us, but B, our word doesn't carry anything. So we scream and shout, rant and rave, and then give them what they need. So please never make an idle threat or promise. Number 4 is very difficult to get our head around, but the opposite of everything we think, that's the truth. So if we think he is he's cheating on me. The truth is he probably isn't. His only cheat is with his drugs. Or you think, oh, he doesn't need to go to meetings because he's doing so well. The opposite is true. He needs the meetings to stay well. My favorite hatred is when families phone and say, oh, they're doing so well, I could get them off the medication. You know, they really didn't need their meds anymore. The opposite of that is they need the meds because it helped them get better. So we do, for a long while, have to challenge all our thinking, because whatever we think, the opposite is the truth. Number 5, get educated. Join a support group and don't stop until you're well, secure, and content. Please join Tough Love, Naranon, Al-Anon, Coda, and continue to attend our Changes Rehab Zoom family meetings. This will be happening for many, many months to come. Even if your loved one is out of treatment, please feel free to use this meeting as a way of support and education. The recovery cycle. It's just a brief picture of what can happen and what needs to change. So I want to start at the top, at the emotional trigger. I believe that addiction is an emotional disease. And I often say to my clients, it's an emotional dis-ease, because you just don't feel comfortable inside. So they'll have an emotional trigger. The trigger would be, I lost my job. Automatically, they'll start craving. If they continue in that cycle, they'll go into the ritual, which will go into the using, which leads to guilt and shame, and it causes more emotional triggers and more cravings and using, and it just becomes that vicious circle. But in recovery, if they have an emotional trigger and they're aware of their craving, they go and they do something different. So we say, go to a meeting, check your 5 pillars, phone your sponsor, phone your counselor, get help, go for a swim, go for a walk, do something that's a new pattern, new association in NA terms, or new habit, healthy habit, to try and break that cycle. And then just 2 pictures. Addiction can be broken. It can be halted. And the small miracles, I believe, start when we as the family start getting better. There's a lot of help for addicts. There's not enough help, not often enough help for families. And we don't know what a miracle looks like. I remember walking to my first Tough Love meeting and people were laughing. And I actually said to the woman I was with, I don't think I'm in the right place. People should be crying and should be hysterical and freaking out. And the lady that was running it came and said, hi, my name is Liz and welcome. And I said, are you sure this is like for drugs? This is a support group for drugs. And she said, yeah. I said, but you're laughing. And she said, yeah, we've learned to laugh. Because here we teach you how to look after yourself. And I swore, I'm not going back to that place because I don't have a problem. He's got the problem. The truth was, they wouldn't give me the manual until my 6th week. So I went for 6 weeks. And when I got the manual, it didn't have the answers I wanted. But I knew that something in the support group was working, and that was people weren't judging me, and people were going through exactly the same thing that I was going through. So I went back, and I stayed for 17 years. And I got a lot of support. I gave them a lot of support, and miracles do happen. So I know this is a very brief, short introduction. I'm going to go back to the questions. And if there's anything we haven't covered tonight you'd like us to cover next week, please let us know. We'd be very happy to do that. Okay, so Kate, can we go back to the questions now, please?
Sure, okay. I don't know which one you want to answer first. There's some shorter ones and longer ones. I think maybe we end off with that.
Let's do the one that I left.
Okay. Okay, so coming from a family of addiction and being in recovery myself with younger kids, how do you suggest to educate kids and families on drugs addiction?
Okay, thank you. It does depend on the age of the kids, but I believe that we need to be honest. Addiction is bred with dishonesty. So in an age-appropriate way, we start being honest and talking. So let's say the kids are 2 and 4. Just seeing their mom and dad not drinking already gives them a certain amount of safety. If somebody is drunk, then don't ridicule them, but you sit them down and say, that person has taken alcohol and alcohol affects them negatively, and how does it make you feel? When they're old enough and they start seeing that parents are different, parents don't drink, parents are calmer, parents are more stable, then you can start saying to them, one of the reasons I don't drink is because I want to be stable and I want to be calm and I want to be available to you. And if they say, why don't you drink? I often say, well, I've got an illness. And that illness means that when I do drink, I drank too much. I don't believe in telling kids about narcotics until they're old enough. And the one thing that we've got to be so careful is not to speak to them in a way like, I did drugs, and I'm going to tell you this because you shouldn't. Kids are going to be curious. So if they know that their parents used, and they think, well, they used, but they survived and they're fine and they're great moms and dads now, it almost like entices them. So be very calm and very basic. Answer the questions that they have without too much graphic detail, but age appropriate. So if somebody says to me, why don't you drink? I say, because I drank too much. What are those meetings that you always go to? They're called AA meetings, and when you're old enough, I'll explain it a little bit more. And then they just get used to the fact, oh, you're going to a meeting, you're going to a meeting. And eventually, when they're old enough, they'll ask directly, what is AA? Is it Alcoholics Anonymous? Are you an alcoholic? Then you can, if you're comfortable enough to say, yeah, I suffer with the disease of addiction. I think it's also important to explain to them from a young age that addiction is hereditary. And if they do start drinking, they need to be very clear that it runs in the family and that there's a chance they could have inherited that gene. They need to be open with you. They need to tell you if it's lovely and if they love it and if they want to continue to do it. And I think that at some point they need to know the dangers, but we mustn't try and scare children into submission. Must be very honest, very simple, very direct, very age appropriate, but letting them know that this disease is more complicated than just the alcohol and the drugs. What consequences are there from that consumption? So Tia's just told us the medical, but we don't think that. You're sitting at home, you're having 2 glasses of wine with dinner 5 times a week or 6 times a week or 7 times a week, and you think, well, I'm not an alcoholic, I don't have consequences, but we don't always register what alcohol is doing to our organs, mainly our liver, our kidneys, and our brain. So when we do assessments and people ask us, what is an alcoholic? I say, well, it depends on how much you consume. If you need to consume less to get more drunk, and what happens to you when you drink. Is there guilt and shame? And ask your family what consequences they feel from your drinking.
Okay. Okay. How much coaching do you give them around being empowered and taking responsibility for themselves?
Okay. Sure, I think we do a lot. It starts when they come into treatment. The very first day they wake up after detox and they get given chores and they make their beds. That they learn to dish up enough food that they are satiated, but that they've left some food for everybody else. We do lots of lectures and talks and groups around it. But I think our focus is on taking personal responsibility. So it's a huge focus and arena for us in rehab.
Can the brain ever repair from drugs and alcohol abuse?
Tia, I'm going to let you answer that one.
Let me just unmute here. Here comes the thing. If there is a certain level of damage that cannot repair, but there's a certain level that does get better. So the big thing with alcohol is the people have to go into very high dosages of vitamins that are currently is expensive because the cheap ones is not available in South Africa, to prevent your brain from getting worse and worse. But there's a level where you can't get it better. So initially, when you detox, or initially when you see the patient, you try your best, and 3 months down the line, you will know if it will get better or not. And if 3 to 6 and maximum a year down the line, if it's not better, then it won't get better. But normally within 3 months, even 6 weeks, we can see if there's going to be permanent problems or not.
Okay. Thanks, Tia. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question.
When the addict comes out of treatment, what do I need?
Go for it, carry on.
Sorry, Kate. Should I carry on?
Yeah.
When the addict comes out of treatment, what do I need to change in my life? Example, remove all alcohol in the house, myself not drink again. We had this question last week, and I'm going to open it to the forum so that somebody else can answer, then we'll give our input afterwards. So, yeah, I think this is such a bone of contention for everybody. And generally my take is we invest a lot when they go into treatment. We invest time and money and energy and emotions. And we don't always know what they need, and neither do they. So we as a treatment center recommend abstinence around them for a period of time. And also, even though they may say, I'm cool, I can handle it, you drink, I don't want you to change your life, they can't be honest. They don't want to be different. An addict hates the fact that they're different to everybody else. So it's a good support to remove alcohol and drugs from their home, from your home, and it's about change. In the first preamble they read in NA, they say we seek out new associations. So a lot of our socializing starts to change. We encourage that they do more breakfasts, they choose their social circle very carefully, that they stick with the winners, they try and start socializing more with people in recovery. So there's, like at NA, they have soccer days, and they have, before COVID, and I think it's going to go back there eventually, they go hiking, they play soccer together, they have braais, they have painting where they all go and paint banners. So changing their surroundings is important, and conversation, regular conversation, and not, do you want to drink? I'm scared, don't use, not those kind of conversations. Like, well done, I saw that you were looking at that person drinking, and it can't be easy for you. I'm proud of you. So changing how we speak to them, I think, is important. But I do suggest that people keep a sober house. Part of Tough Love, I was a chairperson for many, many years, and we did a lot of public support and information and open days and media work. And I remember the one presentation we did at a school. We sent out 60,000 flyers, and a radio show had been promoting it for about a week. We did a lot of work. And on the night, we had 12 attendants. And those 12 had already had kids in their lives, in their families who were addicts. So addiction is such a funny illness, Dudu. It's because there's so much denial and shame and embarrassment. People only really come forward when there's a lot, absolute mayhem and crises. I think with the internet now, there's so much more help and things available. But generally speaking, when we go and do a workshop, we're always preaching to the converted. We make ourselves available to talk to schools and to talk to police stations and hospitals, and we might get about 4 requests a year. So you're right, and I think everybody has a right to this kind of information, but it's generally only when there's a crisis that people seek some help. Okay. Bashir, you've asked for the presentation. So Kate, I will email it to you. And because it's my property, I made it up. So I'm happy to email it to you, and then you can email it to those that do request.
Okay, can those that do request to just put their email up? You can just PM me your email addresses if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. I would like to make a comment. I kept my partner away from alcohol for many months and avoided social events that had alcohol. The first time we attended an event that had alcohol, he relapsed. So I would suggest you keep your loved one away from drugs and alcohol, as it's very difficult for them. Thank you. I think it is important for families to be aware. It is hard. You know, it's hard when your life prior to recovery was focused on socializing and drinking and partying, and they do feel a sense of loss. And when they do launch back into it, it's so scary. We have our halfway house guys who, because of the treatment and you know, they stay away from it for a very long time. And the first time they go to a function, it could be a mom's birthday, a dad's birthday, and they see people drinking, they're in shock because they don't really know how to live life without alcohol and drugs yet. The first year or two is very, very difficult. So yeah, the longer they can, the better, but they must always talk about it. So if you are going out and you say to them, look, I'm not going to drink with you, and let's ask 1 or 2 other people and we'll just hang together, those that don't drink, and tell me how you feel, because I'll tell you how I feel not drinking. Even though I may not be an alcoholic, I feel like I want something in my hand. I'm watching everybody else's glasses. I'm counting how much they're drinking. And that allows the addict to feel more comfortable and not feel such an alien. But talk, and offer that support in a very transparent but gentle, loving way.